Okay, I'd like to reconvene this Executive Matters and Legal Affairs Committee meeting on Resolution 19-182. Where we left off yesterday was we were in the discussion part of our committee deliberations, but we have an additional new matter that we need to take up. Council Chair Anderson has submitted a proposed CD1 with respect to Resolution 19-182. So, and this has been distributed to all of the committee members, and copies of this are available for the audience or public to also review. But this seems to be a very straightforward amendment, nothing complicated, and although I think it could help to strengthen the resolution. So I defer now to Chair Anderson to explain your reso.
Thank you,
amendment.
Chair. I'll be very brief with my explanation. The first amendment that my proposed committee draft 1 makes is to correct the spelling of receive in the title. My apologies for that. And adding a new resolve clause to read as follows. Be it further resolved that nothing in this resolution shall be construed as a waiver of the right of the council to review and approve respective phases of the project, including but not limited to any eminent domain proceedings in agreement with the state of Hawaii pertaining to the project, and miscellaneous technical and non-substantive amendments, Chair. That explains my proposed committee draft 1.
Yes, so again, it reads, be it further resolved that nothing in this resolution shall be construed as a waiver of the right of the council to review and approve respective phases of the project, including but not limited to any eminent domain proceeding and agreements with the state of Hawaii pertaining to the project. That's the substantive additional amendment that this committee is now considering. Now, we're really only supposed to be in discussion among the committee members, but given the fact that I understand that this resolution has significant public interest, and this is a new proposed amendment that has been offered for the committee's consideration, I will permit limited public testimony only with respect to the amendment that Council Chair Anderson has submitted, because we went through 5 hours of testimony yesterday, and it was testimony, the public hearing was needed. We needed to receive, to afford the public an adequate and full opportunity to share your comments and concerns, and we really received a lot of your testimonies, and we've taken them under careful consideration and advisement. So I wouldn't want to reopen this committee hearing where we would be receiving the same kinds of testimonies from the public that we already reviewed and considered yesterday. So with respect to the proposed amendment that Council Chair Anderson has just described, is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and offer testimony in regards to that amendment? Yes.
Just clarify something. So what happened to the amendment that Councilmember Waters put in yesterday?
Well,
Does this change what he
that's
did, or does it
still on the
replace
table.
what he did, or is it in addition
Yeah,
to?
Council
did
Chair
you
Anderson,
combine them both?
Why don't you clarify?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Pine, for the question. My amendment is entirely separate from Councilmember Waters' amendments that he's offered. Additionally, Chair Emeritus, I'd also like to share that Council Vice Chair Kobayashi could not be here today due to a family commitment, and we'd just like to ask that she be excused from today's meeting. She apologizes, but she had a family commitment that she had to honor. Thank you. Nonetheless, though, she did also ask that I continue to share her objection to moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, so just testimonies on the amendments that are before us. So we have Council Chair Anderson's amendment, and then, yes, there were hand-carried amendments offered by Councilmember Waters. So I'll permit testimony only on with respect to those particular amendments, all right? I don't want a rehash of the same testimony we received yesterday. All right, please come forward. And state your name for the record again.
Hi, I'm Ellen Watson, resident of Manoa. And with respect to the amendments proposed by Mr. Waters and the amendment proposed by Mr. Anderson, they're pretty much essentially the same language. And I wondered, my concern is on Exhibit A of the resolution, you all have Exhibit A. The last 2 paragraphs talk about what the contract would bind the parties to, and so I don't know that you will be able to, if you sign this contract, exercise your amendments. I think that the agreement precludes you from doing that.
Okay, questions for the testifier? Okay, any other testimonies with respect to the amendments? Okay, we have a gentleman here.
Hi, my name is Dave Watase. Concern I have is this amendment really doesn't have teeth, doesn't have the power, and really what the community is looking for is the opportunity to make changes and adjustments. All this basically does is it, we can kind of approve the phases as it goes forward. If, for example, they decide detention base, it's already in the plan, that they're going to go forward with, let's say, eminent domain and detention basins in the valleys, the way they have it designed, in the locations they have it designed. What they're going to tell you is it's just one piece of a puzzle, and in order for it to work, we need all the pieces together. So at that point, you really have no option but to say, okay, if we don't put that piece in there, there's going to be a hole in the puzzle, so we have to approve it. And it kind of seems like what you guys are doing with rail. It just keeps on going, and really you're handicapped because you didn't give yourself the power you needed to truly make the changes that I think the community wants. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Okay, next testifier.
Committee Chair Ron Minor, members of your Executive Matters and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Arvid Youngquist. I want to thank the two amendment offerers and some discussions, and there was a comment made by the council chair whether the individual or individuals from the military was present to answer some of his concerns in response to at least one of the testimony. In reference to this amendment, there are two figures, 224, 224 million, and there's another amount, which is a smaller amount, 125,000, which is from the state. There was a comment made by one of the testifiers from the administration, or on behalf of the administration, that we can change our minds anytime, but it's not a free deal, not the testifier. So I want to know which amount that we're going to end up owing, the entire amount, or the federal amount, or the state amount. So that's my question. Before you decide, please ascertain the details on that matter. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Okay, any other testifiers? Yes.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair and committee members. Robert Croning, the Director of the Department of Design and Construction. Pertaining to the two amendments, we don't have any problem with the Chair's addition, the be it further resolved. We believe this basically re-emphasizes authorities that you already have, and so it doesn't hurt to put that in there. But we do have a significant problem with the second proposal of amendment, the be it further resolved that prior to the obligation, commitment, and expenditure of city funds for the project. Basically, what this is somewhat doing is performing project management tasks. Council's role is not project management. The executive branch has all the expertise, staff to manage the project. What this essentially does is it kills the project. So if you're going to kill the project, just kill it outright instead of trying to do it with 1,000 paper cuts, because this will end up being You know, the lawyers, the attorneys will be arguing over what the definition of is for forever. And in that time, this is just it's gonna kill the project. Because, as you know, when the PPA is signed, funds are obligated. And so this basically, you know, prevents that from happening, and so it kills the project. So I'd say, please relook at this. I don't think this is basically killing the project, and so if that's what you want to do, I'd say just do it instead of doing it this way. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, we're allowing the director to testify, and so no comments from the audience at this time.
But
you have questions?
what I can, so what she's saying is the packet that was just sent out with all the additions doesn't contain Council Members Waters' amendment, that's all. I got this was handed out yesterday, and that's why I
Right.
have it, yes.
I think for the audience, the amendments that were proposed by Councilmember Waters were posted to the Council DocuShare website and to the City Council's Granicus Pilot Project website last night. So as of, I don't know, 7 o'clock or whatever time that was, it was available to everyone. If you would like a hard copy, my staff would be happy to make you a copy.
As my understanding, we also made copies available yesterday, not just for the committee members, but they were available. We had hard copies yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions for the director?
No, for the audience, the people who may not have gotten the hard
Thank you. Okay, further testifiers? Yeah, did we made hard copies before?
Well, it's unclear. Are you taking testimony on both
Yes.
amendments?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think what you just
Oh,
heard.
why don't you state your name for the record?
Sorry. My name is David Frankel. What you just heard displays a arrogance of the executive branch when it comes to at least this specific project, and an ignorance of the law. Listen, the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't care how our state and county laws work, but the way our laws work, regardless of what the Army Corps wants or thinks, is there has to be a state-accepted environmental impact statement before any agency can expend funds on this project. That's state law, HRS Chapter 343. And HRS Chapter 205A, as well as the county's law regarding special management area permits, requires that an SMA permit be obtained before development begins. That's, if it's a major project, which I believe this is, this city council has to approve an SMA permit. That's not something the executive branch gets to determine itself whether it's complying with the law. It's this council that has to do that. So it is not death of a thousand cuts. It is a recognition of the legal obligations that the city administration has to follow. And it's a little alarming that some members of the administration don't feel that they should comply with the law. That's really disturbing. And those legal processes are processes that allow the public to comment and participate in details that have not yet been provided to the public. Thank you.
Questions?
I have a follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
You referred to the EIS being accepted as a condition precedent to any kind of expenditure of funds. What is the status of the final EIS?
So there is a federal EIS. This is a little confusing. There's a federal law that governs how EIS is done for federal projects. But in addition, there's a state law. When you're dealing with state funds and state and county projects, whether it's state land, state money, county money. And just because you've done the federal EIS does not excuse one from doing the state or the state EIS. So that needs to be done. A draft was done but has never been finalized. And in fact, you've heard from various officials that a lot of information and data has been updated since 2017. So the state EIS because it's 2 years later, needs to be significantly better than the one that was done in 2017 in the federal system, because there's new information. And the project has changed. They've told you that it's changed over time. So there is, state law says you cannot expend money on a project or use state or county land until the EIS process has been completed, and it hasn't been. I think part of the issue is there's been a dispute between the state and the counties who's going to take the lead, and it's stuck in limbo right now.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Pine?
So based on what you just said, this resolution is useless then, because this resolution asks us to accept and expend limited state money on the project.
There are a number of strange things about the resolution. It is attempting to give the city the authorization to sign the PPA, but it's strange because, one, the legislature didn't appropriate any money for the project, and the state is saying it's going to give money to the city that's never been appropriated by the legislative body. And the other strange thing is it's calling for the expenditure and obligation of money when state law doesn't allow that to happen until these processes are complete. And now the Army Corps may not care about that, but that is a state obligation. So the folks negotiating the PPA with the Army need to say, we'll sign a PPA with you, but we can't obligate any money until state processes are complete. And that allows you folks to retain control so that you can have all the information you need before giving a project like this a green light. You've heard a lot of concerns from the community. You've got to hold the reins, not let the horse gallop off, because you need that information for real decision making.
So you just, based on what you said, what we're doing is we can't pass anything today because it would be illegal.
No, I would prefer you not to pass anything. I was, but
Because you're saying some of the language in here is basically illegal. I mean, we're saying that we're going to accept and expend the money. And you said we can't do that until the EIS is completed, so we can't do that today.
The original version of the resolution, I believe, would violate the law, yes.
So wait, so did the amendment fix that part?
I think the second amendment ensures that the city does not violate the law because it prevents or says the money is not encumbered, obligated, or expended until these processes are followed. Right?
Okay, so
That-
we can't expend any of the money anyway.
You shouldn't, I think there are people within the city administration who would
we
like
can't
to.
pass anything because we're not really not doing anything.
I'm not sure what you're at. I'm not sure I understand because I don't know if you're dealing with the resolution or the amendment.
No, I just don't know what the rush is if it's illegal to do some of these
That's
things.
that's what I said
Based
yesterday.
on what you just said, and I didn't
Yeah.
hear this yesterday, and so
Yeah.
that was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Waters?
If you don't mind staying for a second. So I agree with you that this resolution is basically a workaround because the legislature did not appropriate the money, right? They could have. I think the Senate did, the House did not, right?
Right.
So this is a creative way to try to get the money from the state through the governor's office, right? I think so we're all on the same page there. As far as sections A, B, and C, the EIS, all applicable special management use permits, and applicable stream channel permits, they're already required to do that under current law, right? State law.
They are, yes.
Okay. And at this point, that EIS is stuck in limbo, in your opinion, is because neither the state nor the city is willing to take the rein and do that. And then on section, there's A, B, C, D, and E. Just pointed out section E, I've been told by our attorneys that, which says the city has sufficient funding to maintain the project. I've been told that we cannot include that because we as a body cannot tie the hands of future councils
Which
in
is
that
which
regard.
is which is funny because the PPA actually does tie the hands of future councils because you are obligated to engage in the repair work, which you have to fund, and so the city attorney's analysis is rather narrow because either you can't tie future councils or you can, and if you cannot, then you can't sign the PPA because it binds future councils to fund the maintenance. You're obligated to.
Good point. Thank you. May I have Director Kronig, Chair?
Sure. He should be given the opportunity to respond.
Well, I'll ask a few questions and then you can respond. So, what is your opinion as far as what Dr. Frankel has pointed out?
Okay.
J.D. Frankel.
So the, yes, the HEPA 343 has not been signed, and it's with DLNR right now, and we're not 100% sure whether they'll sign it or they'll want us to sign it. But the impact on here is that you can't obligate, right, commit or expend city funds for the project. What hasn't been explained is there is a distinction, and it comes between design monies and construction monies. So if we sign the PPA, we are committing to pay for the monies that have already been expended in design and study and all that. And so that's obligating money, I would say. We may decide not to pay it for 30 years because that's a special program that the Corps has allowed, that we can defer payment until after construction is done. So the obligation actually happens later, but it is an obligation. So as soon as we sign that PPA, if this is there, it's telling us we can't do it because we've already have to pay for certain design funds and things that are done. We cannot go forward. We are not going to break any laws. We're not going to go forward with construction if we don't have the EIS done, and so the EIS has to be signed. As far as the funding for maintenance is a strange question. I mean, that would mean we could never build a comfort station in a park because comfort stations are going to last longer than an administration or a council term, and yet it still has to be maintained for the rest of its life. So the argument about not being able to do this project because we're committing future councils to maintain the project, there's a disconnect there. I just don't see that.
I do want to point out subsection D of my amendments that we're asking you to look at alternatives, including reduction of impervious surfaces and the use of the Alawai Golf Course for flood retention have been explored. I know that that's part of the plan with Alawai, but I guess what I'm getting at is if you could increase the use of the Alawai Golf Course. I think at the Blaisdell, one of the golfers came up and he said he was okay with that. And secondly, I know we went round and round on the EIS with Ala Moana Beach Park, but I hope we're not going to do that here, that you would open up that EIS to consider changes and alternatives such as reduction of impervious surfaces. I mean, can you assure us that you're going to do that?
But, okay. I'd like you to let me know what impervious surfaces you're concerned about. There are almost none in this project.
There's a lot of cement in this project. All the cement is
Most of the
impervious.
cement will be in a vertical wall, so the imperviousness of it is however wide the wall is in the certain places. I mean, the height of it, you're not having a concern whether it's impervious sideways. It's vertical. So it's the width of the wall is basically what becomes impervious.
So
And then
no
there's a
hardening
few
of the stream beds
spillways.
at all?
The amount of hardening, so the way to describe this, and this is only going to happen at most about 3 places in the stream where the pass-through detention basins will be. None of the stream courses are changing. They're all going to be the same natural course that they take right now. One of the slight changes, and at most 3 different places. Again, this could change based on the work that they're doing, and we may pull one out or 2 or 3, who knows. But the detention basin will allow the stream to pass in the same path that it does now. It'll just be going through a culvert for a few hundred feet underneath the basin bank. And then at the end of those 2, there'll be a small area of riprap just to prevent the scour, right? When the water comes out of that culvert, it backs up and it could eat away at the land. You have to protect that a little so it doesn't eat it away. That, and then the spillway you use at the top of the bank so that when we hit the 125-year flood and it overtops, it has a place to go and it just goes naturally. That is basically the impervious pieces of this project.
Well, okay, let me phrase it another way. I think the community just wants to know that you're going to be open to alternatives to what we've currently been told about these large walls that you just talked about, and that you'd consider it. I think that's what we all want. And if you can say, yeah, we will consider it, that's what I need to hear.
And I'm sorry, I'm not doing a better job of saying exactly what you're saying. I mean, we're already doing that. And we at the city, who are locals, live here, want the same thing everybody else does. And I've mentioned we're making it as environmentally friendly as possible. So we're forcing a lot of the walls to not be walls. They're going to be levees, they're going to be berms, it's going to be grass, it's going to be natural. The detention basins are all going to be natural, except for the spillway and the little bit of scour protection at the ends. And yes, we're using the golf course as much as possible. Every meeting I go into, you ask Mr. Herzog, every meeting I go into, I'm telling them, we want to use as much of that golf course as possible, because even a millimeter reduction in wall height is a success. Any kind. I don't care how much lower we can get that height around the Alawai Canal to drop. We want that. That's like priority number 1. So that's why we've also forced the walls to go out, because if you go out, it creates more volume, which maybe allow you to drop it another millimeter or centimeter or inch. You put more in the golf course, that may allow it to drop some too. But there are some restrictions, right? He talks a lot about this bowl. When it goes into the bowl, you got to get it out of there. You got to keep it from going in there in the first place and then get it out of there. So, I mean, other than, the same way your constituents have to trust that you're working in their better half, they have to trust that I'm working in their better half too, that we're going to make this the best project that can feasibly happen and still provide the protection that we're obligated to protect.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could you just clarify the status again of the non-federal cash contribution?
The status of it?
Yes, as far as, David Franco just mentioned the non-appropriation by the ledge.
Right. So, as was explained by Council Chair, because the state legislature didn't authorize the CIP, the executive branch, the governor, believes in this project also, and so they're working to, in another way, in something called certificates of participation, to get us the money that we need to be the non-federal sponsor, and by them doing that, it's put certain obligations on us, such as having to get this resolution passed. So that's where this comes from.
So before the federal government will sign off on this agreement, would the monies have to be there as far as the non-federal contribution is concerned?
We will have to sign something called a self-certification of funding availability. Don't quote me, it may be a little, but basically we have to sign a document that says, yes, we have the funding. It doesn't necessarily have to be available right there. And that's why the way we pay this could be over like a 30-year mortgage, and it doesn't even start until construction is stopped. But at this point, before the Corps can even go into construction, the Corps of Engineers, before they can go into construction, that certification has to be signed and the PPA has to be signed, one after the other. You got the self-certification, and then after the Corps of Engineers reviews that and says, okay, we agree, you guys are good for your money, let's sign the agreement, and that obligates us for the project. Until, unless we decide to terminate it later, but then that does come with some costs. It does, I think yesterday someone said we're obligated for the entire amount. It's not. If we terminate, we're only obligated for monies expended, 35% of monies expended.
Okay, Council Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair Emeritus. Director, this project does in fact work in the special management area, yes?
I'm sorry, I don't know that answer.
It's in the water, I would imagine it does.
Special management?
So we will have to get 404, 401 water quality certification.
Right. So there's certainly federal permitting requirements, but I don't know if they're special management permit requirements. I don't know. It might be. Some of it might be.
But if the project did require an SMA permit, who grants those permits?
You do.
Okay. So you would have to come before us to get that permit. And you would do that?
Certainly.
Okay. So, that being said, what's the problem with that being in the resolution? I mean, you have to come to us to get an SMA permit anyway if it's required. If you don't need an SMA permit, then
Right.
you wouldn't have to come to us. It wouldn't be required.
So maybe I'm not reading this right, but it says that we can't obligate the funds until that's done. And we'll need to sign the PPA before we get to that point. It's a matter of when these things happen.
Well, it says any and all applicable special management area use permits have been obtained. I would imagine if it's not needed, then it's not applicable, right? And then that's what I'm reading anyway.
But the be it further resolved that prior to the obligation, commitment, or expenditure of city funds, so I can't sign the PPA unless the permits
It
have
says the
been
city shall
obtained.
ensure that any and all applicable special management area use permits have been obtained. So if it's not applicable, if you don't need one, then it doesn't apply, right? I mean, if you
Well-
don't need if the SMA is not required, then you don't need it.
Right.
So what I'm asking you is what the problem with that language is if it turns out you don't need the SMA permit. And what the problem with this language, I'm asking you, what the problem with this language is if, for whatever reason, you don't need an environmental impact statement.
Oh, we need an environmental
Okay.
impact statement, so we.
What I'm
and actually,
saying is,
that's
though,
almost
what I'm
done.
asking you is, what's the problem with this language here? Because it's, I mean, I would assume it doesn't apply if you don't need it. It's only applicable
but I
if it's
think-
required.
Well, right, but I think a lot of these are, we do need them. But,
Okay, so if you do need them anyway, then how come it can't be in the Reso? If you need it
well,
anyway.
because, well, again, going back to the be it further resolved says prior to that obligation. What I'm saying is signing the PPA is obligating funds.
Okay,
And so that we need to happen relatively soon. And the special management use permits or the EIS signing or any other permits may happen after that. So I think, I don't know, maybe I'm right, maybe we need to get the lawyers in and talk about it, but maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it seems like the timing of this, we would be prevented from signing the PPA until these things are done. And
but,
if-
and you're also telling the council that you're not sure if the SMA is required or not, you don't know.
Right now, I don't know. Let's assume it is.
Okay, so then you have to come back to us and ask for it anyway.
But that, we would do after the signing of the PPA, and this is preventing me from signing the PPA. That's
Thank
all.
you.
It's the timing.
I guess that's a legal question, Chair, but thank you.
I think, Director Cronin, the thing that is becoming confusing is that Councilmember Waters' amendment appears to say that prior to obligation of city funds for the project, including funds that come from the state, as of this point in time, the funds have not come from the state. There's
Right.
been no appropriation. The state is examining, certificates of participation, types of financing. But I believe in the cities and states discussions, as was sort of represented to me and Councilmember Kobayashi, was that your timeline for achieving that outcome is sometime in early November or mid-November. So what I think the amendment is seeking to do is to say, you can go ahead and sign the PPA now, but before you obligate those state funds that have yet to be provided by the state to the city, these are the things that need to get done. But, I think you're mixing apples and oranges.
And I may be. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer to really understand that well. But I'm wondering, are you, the way I see the signature on the PPA, that second, we've obligated funds.
I believe the way the language of this document reads, the city is obligated to undertake all of the work associated with the project. But if you haven't received the funds, it's kind of like the cart before the horse.
Well, right,
So
so-
if you're asking the council to approve your ability to sign the PPA before you receive the state funds, it seems like, why would we otherwise obligate ourselves before we know that the state funds are
Right.
actually
Okay.
in hand?
Okay, I guess maybe I am misunderstanding. I don't think we're asking you to let us sign the PPA before we have the funds. This is just getting us to the next step so that when the funds are available, we can accept them. We don't plan on signing the PPA until we have the funds. So we're not.
Okay, so if you're not signing the PPA until you have the funds, and presumably you will be working between the state and the city to get to that point, then why is the timing of this resolution
Now?
necessary now? Because I think, that's what really everybody is so
Okay.
concerned about, because even for all of us, we just learned about this within the last 2 weeks when it was
Right.
introduced on August 8th.
Okay.
So I think that's the big disconnect.
So the light came on. I know what you're asking now. The urgency is because, and this is speculation, right? So nobody knows for sure. So we are working on speculation. We believe that 30 August is another critical review period for headquarters, Corps of Engineers on the whole program. And that's why when I originally introduced this Reso, I said even this Reso doesn't guarantee success. We're hoping that if we show good faith that we're working towards making this happen, being able to get the funds that we need and go forward with the project, that will help buy us more time to November. But there's no guarantee. They can say, thanks, but we're moving the money. And as Ms. Watson says, they may say, no, heck, you got till next summer. Nobody knows for sure. But the indications that the Corps of Engineers here has gotten as they travel to Washington, D.C. every month to do this review process is that there's not a lot of time. And there may not even be till November. That there's so much pressure to get shovels in the ground that they don't care whether it's in Honolulu or in Omaha, Nebraska or Detroit. And so that's where the urgency is coming from, is this is our show of faith to say, please give us a little more time to work out the funding. I hope that explains
I
it.
guess the perplexing question from a community standpoint as well as from the council standpoint is typically, whenever we have actions that come before the council for approval, there has been some agreement or some sort of expression of financing support. So it would seem that if part of what the city and state are trying to demonstrate as being indicative of the strong level of support, it would seem to make sense that we would expedite getting the city and state together on the financing that's going to be available, and then using that as a means to demonstrate a commitment level to the Army Corps of Engineers, rather than saying the first thing is to adopt this resolution so you can sign the PPA. It's kind of very confusing.
Okay. There is a representative from the state here if you'd like to ask him about their commitment, but,
Okay,
okay.
Well, we'll have.
sorry.
So, the discussion has been on, and focus has been on the word obligation, but it also talks about, during the Councilmember Waters' amendment, it also uses the word, or reference the word commitment. So if you focus on the word commitment, then I can see the director's point that in signing this agreement, in effect, the interpretation of the agreement would be that when the monies are received by the city, that by signing this agreement, that those monies received from the state, say it happens in November or whenever it happens, will be expended for the purposes of the flood control improvements that the monies are intended to cover, that the federal dollars are also intended to cover. So there's the reference to obligation, but there's also commitment. So is that kind of in line with what you're thinking, Director, or? It demonstrates, your signing of this demonstrates a commitment that when you receive the funds, this says you receive the funds, you know, you're authorized to do so. When you receive the funds, there's a commitment to expend the city monies to match the federal dollars for the federal flood control improvements.
Right. For me, certainly a layman in the language that you're talking about, it sounds appropriate to me, but it's a little over my head, and I would ask the experts to actually answer that question.
Okay, Councilmember Pine.
Who requested this project to begin with?
Who
Was
requested?
it the city that requested Congress? Or did Congress, were they the originator of this need?
There is a very long history of this project that I think goes back to 2005, 2004. I hate to put you on the spot. Do you know? Our Corps of Engineers may know because they've been overseeing this project for close to 2 decades.
But so it was the Army Corps of Engineers that said we needed this type of flood control project?
It may have been the Army Corps of Engineers or a congressman or a congresswoman at the time who asked for a study of the watershed. I imagine that's how it starts, right? This is a congressionally inspired, good word, inspired project from way back when to analyze.
Our congressional delegation.
Right. And that's how the funds get appropriated normally. And so it was appropriated. There was a non-federal sponsor at the time, and it's been the state the whole time. So the state has been the non-federal sponsor in all the feasibility studies and all the other work that's gone on and got us to this point where an EIS is finished and there were alternatives analyzed and one selected and recommended to Congress. It's that phase is somewhat over. The state has decided that they don't believe they're the appropriate level of government to follow this on through construction now. And so they've had discussions with the city, and that's where the agreements were that, well, I wasn't in the room during the discussions, but in my head I would imagine both levels of government understand public safety is a responsibility of both levels of government, all 3 levels of government, and that the state said, well, okay, we'll provide the capital funds, and city, you take the maintenance of it afterwards, because you're better suited to do that than the state is. And so that agreement, it wasn't documented, I don't think, but was somewhat what the agreement is to go forward.
What year was it funded? When this funding that we're trying to save, what year
This one right
was it?
now.
Yes, in Congress.
2018? 2018.
So it seems like so much effort is being put on by the city to sell this project when we should really push it back to our congressional members so they can perhaps explain to their constituents why they made this a priority, why it was so urgent. It seems like we're kind of coming in at the end game and we weren't part of this whole history of funding this. They fought for this project, right? Our congressional delegation. So
Right.
they would be able to defend it.
Right, and we've been a part of it. I mean, you personally may not have been a part of it, but the whole process is very open. The development of the alternatives, the EIS, everybody's had the opportunity to be a part of it. So we all have been a part of it. And yes, Congress has approved it, and so our delegations, I don't know if all of them have approved it. I know Senator Schatz sure is an advocate of this project. So I can't answer for anybody else, but I know we've presented to the Corps of Engineers and supported their effort to get this included in the emergency supplemental because the opportunity struck. And when it struck, we said, let's take advantage of it. So that's why there's some bit of a rush. But in reality, we all have been a part of this. I mean, there's many people in this room who have comments that are documented in the EIS. So they've been part of the whole process.
It just seems so odd that so many people are against this project, but then it's a top priority of government. I'm having a hard time understanding why that is the case. So that's why I was thinking that maybe we should just have the congressional delegation have these type of hearings, because maybe they need to hear from their own constituents of why they don't support funding this project, which they made it a priority. There seems to be a communication disconnect with the congressional delegation
Right.
and the opponents of the project. And I don't know what it is. It could just be a simple sentence. I don't know. This isn't my district, so I haven't been as involved, but just from what I've seen, there's just a lot of anxiety about this project, and I don't think anyone's right or wrong. I'm not going to point fingers, but whenever there's an anxiety with our own constituents, we take that as something has not been communicated properly, or something has been communicated that makes them fear their livelihood of their way of life.
Right.
And because it's very rare that we have people even show up to some of our hearings on some of these things. And so I would make the request to this council that we need to push this back to our congressional delegation to see if this is something that they want to communicate with their constituents about. This shouldn't be something that we make a decision on. This should be back to our congressional delegation.
Well, so I'm as confused as you two about the opposition, and I will point fingers. I'm going to point them at me. I haven't done a good job getting ahead of this. And what that's allowed happen is a gap in information that has been filled with now a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings, which I've been trying to make up for. Mr. Herzog and I have been going around trying to make up for, and it's an uphill battle. But the project is a good project. It's a very good project. I mean, and the opposition to it, I think, is fueled by a lot of just not understanding, and then maybe not believing some of the stuff that's being presented.
Thank you for making that comment. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Waters?
Ultimately, the project benefits Waikiki, my district, right? So,
Well, I think it benefits more than Waikiki. There is the Makali, Moiliili, the flooding that is predicted to go in those areas now without a project will be lessened in those areas.
okay. I think that's part of the problem. I mean, you interrupt rather than listening to what I have to say.
I'm sorry. Well, I just,
So I'm trying to say that I don't want this project to die, okay? And I just want to make sure the public's concerns are taken into consideration. You know, but you brought up a good point about the certificate of funding availability. If the city signs a certificate of funding availability, and that whole process, the COPS process, right, where we're bypassing the legislature, that fails. Because we sign the certificate of funding availability, we're then obligated to come up with the matching funds, right?
so again, I will defer to Mr. Herzog on that, but the way I understand it is the PPA is what actually then makes that self-certification active, for lack of a better term. So no, the signing of the self-certification itself is not an obligation. It's when that combined with the PPA becomes a true obligation document.
And I have to read the PPA a little closer, but is it like a condition precedent that the PPA has to go through, the money has to come through before we're on the hook? I'm not sure you can answer that question. I have to take the opportunity to ask you this, though, since Army Corps is also here. You stated that the city is better suited to maintain the streams. Well, you know, Wailupe Stream in Aina hasn't been maintained for years. Years, right? And when I've put risers in asking why it hasn't been done, they say because they cannot get the permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. You know, and I'm concerned about that. Again, that's not for discussion really here, but I got to tell you, that needs to be fixed too. Because now we're obligated to now maintain the watershed, Alawai watershed, and if the same thing happens with Wailupe Stream, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Because Wailupe Stream has not been maintained. I know you folks are right now fixing it, and I appreciate that, but, you know, I've been walking door to door for 4 years now, and I've looked at that stream, and it wasn't maintained at all. At all. Well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? So you mentioned, and his name has been mentioned quite frequently, Senator Schatz. He appears to be the strongest proponent in Congress for this particular project. I haven't had a chance to speak to him directly, but the concern is about the loss of federal funding. So what has Senator Schatz shared with the administration or with you, your department, or you as director, in regards to any concerns that he has regarding the loss of federal funding and the need to sign, to approve this resolution and to have the city sign the PPA?
I don't know a lot of the details. I've only been in one meeting with him personally several months ago, and basically the meeting was held with the mayor and the governor for him to throw his support behind making sure we did this and got it done together. I don't know if he's made any comments about the urgency and whether he thinks the funding's going away or not. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Okay, that's fine. Any other Council Chair?
Director, we have heard from some that the federal government says that there is no risk of this funding to not act now. I've been looking for that correspondence, though, and I haven't found it. You have anything you can share with us?
The way I can explain it is the Senior Executive Service, Mr. Lilly from the Corps of Engineers, who goes to Washington every month and has these conversations, has brought that back. Whether he's documented that in any way, I don't know. We can ask him to do that if we'd like.
What is that?
He has gone to these reviews in Washington, D.C. about the funding, the $17 million funding from the emergency supplemental. And so he's come back with the information that this funding for the $224 million that the federal government has authorized for this project is in high risk of being taken away.
Okay. But some have testified to that they're getting information from the federal government that's contrary to that. Have you seen any of that information? To the contrary?
To the contrary? I haven't.
You haven't seen anything to the contrary?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Did you indicate that there's a state representative here?
There is.
Okay, did the committee members want me to call him forward? Did you have any questions of, and who's that state representative? Okay, why don't you just join us, and perhaps you can, there's a concern about the state funds, and whether that's going to be forthcoming to the city. You look familiar.
He looks a lot happier, too.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair, members of the Council. I'm Robert Yu with State of Hawaii Department of Budget and Finance.
So why don't you just give us an update on that process of the certificate of participation, and ultimately that for the funds to be made available to
Yeah, sure.
to the city.
We're making progress on try to secure funding for this project. As of today, we have secured bond counsel, and yesterday was the deadline for proposals to come in, underwriter proposals, and we expect to be able to select an underwriter in the next couple weeks or so. So by the end of this month, we should have the team ready, so we could really start the process of preparing all the necessary documents to be able to provide the approximately $125 million by the end of November. And looking at the time frame, that would probably be the earliest we could get the money.
Okay. So can we say that it's a certainty, 100% certainty that the monies will be generated and revenues provided to the city, or might there be some glitches that could arise that could create some complications in regards to the raising of the monies that are needed?
Well, yeah, I can't represent that, there'll be no glitches, and I can't represent that it's 100% certainty that we'll get the money, because there's a lot of things that has to be done between now and November 30th. Some of the things are, process that we have to go through, and some of the things that may delay or put a little wrench on the process would be, what we're doing here today, right? So, this resolution, from what I understand, when I read it, is to be able to accept the money when we have the money to give to the state. As far as I know, that's what it is. So, and we're here, just interested in knowing, what the decision-making process is going to be for this.
So what you're saying, the focus has been, well, we need this resolution in order to demonstrate good faith to the federal government. But are you also saying that by passing this resolution, this also sends a strong signal to the administration for you to go forward with the issuance of the certificates and to generate the monies that can then be shared with the city for us to be able to construct the flood control improvements?
Well, I'm not sure it's a signal, but the resolution actually says, the resolution has to be passed before the city and county could accept money from the state. So I'm not sure that's a signal as much as a requirement that you have to pass something like that. Now, I hear, questions whether it has to be done today or tomorrow or next week. That I can't answer.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, any other testifiers? Yes. Oh, you happen to be in the room, so come forward and testify.
Good afternoon and aloha.
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 I'm Kirk Caldo, Mayor of the City and County of Honolulu. I want to thank you for allowing me to come down and testify. I've been upstairs and I'm going to be running out to another meeting, but I thought I'd come down listening to discussion. Just to bring some focus on the decisions that you're making. Couple of things. One, this Alawai flood mitigation effort has been ongoing from about the year 2000 because of flooding that's occurred in the Alawai Basin in Makiki, Manoa, and Pololo. I happen to be the representative for Manoa back in 2004 when he had a flood. That was a 5 or 10 year flood that caused about $100 million in damage, mainly to University of Hawaii, but also other parts of the valley that I represent. It happened in the evening. I was down in Waikiki. I got a call and said, your valley's washing away. I thought they were exaggerating. I went up and I saw my valley washing away. And I stayed up all night and the next day, but I went to places like Pamoa Road, which is below the lower part of the valley, and talked to older Japanese women who almost drowned, hung on the rafters of their homes. And it looked like a war zone. The National Guard was out and, debris everywhere. It rushed through Noelani School. Basically, the stream in Manoa is not the stream of old. They altered it, but water seeks its way, and it jumped the banks by the Woodlawn Bridge and went right through Noelani. Totally damaged the school. It happened during the day. Kids would have washed away and drowned. So I became aware of this flood effort, this mitigation effort that started in 2001. I wasn't so interested then, but after 2004, we're very interested, and Councilwoman Kobayashi was too. We went to many, many meetings in the valley on this issue with the Army Corps involved and many others. And we kept wondering, where's the money and when is it going to happen? Because it could happen again. It was only a 5 or 10 year flood. Talked about the spillway over by the Woodlawn Bridge and all of these things. And things moved very slowly because it cost a lot of money. And they talked about hundreds of millions. And at one point, they were telling me we're going to have to create a flood district like you do along the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, the Ohio River, where the people of the area impacted by flood, you raise the real property tax, not a popular thing, and you use that money to pay for these flood improvement projects, something I wasn't keen about. But Congress started working on, efforts to raise money for flood mitigation projects around the country, including in Hawaii. By our congressional delegation in the past, including our senior Senator Dan Inouye, who I worked for, and up to the current delegation that's worked very hard. And it was surprising when last year I learned that there was money for this flood project. I was really quite shocked because it happened quickly by Congress, who really wanted to address the hurricanes from Harvey, Maria, and Irma, and said we need to do things in these areas to address flooding in the future. But there were other types of projects, and one is the project here in the city and county of Honolulu. And I want to thank our congressional delegation for working hard to get that money, in particular Senator Schatz, who's on the Appropriations Committee and was. Now the good news, we have Ed Case on the Appropriations in the House too, but he wasn't there when this happened, I don't think. And it came as a shock when the money dropped into our pockets. When I went down with the Army Corps, I went to see what was going to happen, and just like many here today, we all love our Aina and our communities, and I live in the Manoa Valley. I was not happy with the height of walls along the Alawai Canal. I was not happy with the pump station that's down by the Waikiki Library that was very large and looked like an industrial facility. I wasn't happy with the retention bases up on Lower Road in Manoa, where my friends live, or in Pololo Valley, where friends live. I was not. And I expressed my anger quite strongly to them. You can ask Jeff, he was there. And Robert Cronin was there. The good news is they heard me complain, and they started making adjustments. And ever since, as I've talked to these guys, they made adjustments. So most recently, I was at a 4th of July celebration at Iolani School for little kids, and the headmaster of the school came up and said, we don't like the project because it's going to flood Iolani. And I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. So they came in and we talked to them, and their concern was Pololo Stream goes right by the school. And of course, water is going to come up under this project because they're raising the wall of the Alawai Canal, and it could. The Army Corps is open. They say they will build a berm there. So it not only won't flood Iolani School, but it won't flood the elementary school along the Hawaii Elementary. So I saw that in the past 2 months. Yeah, Robert? Adjustments being made there. I've heard that they're looking at probably maybe 2 of the 7 basins not being needed, because as they adjust, they're in 35% planning. When I say, I want to see your 100% now, they say, you won't see 100% now. We can't do it. It's being phased. You'll see 100% by the end of the year for a debris catching system in Manoa Stream by the Manoa District Park, and something down by Hokulani. And as we move out, you'll see it being built out. So we're not going to, as much as we all want 100%, like anything, it takes a while. As they do studies and models and adjustments, they change what they think is necessary. They don't want to spend all the money if they don't have to. And they do not want to have impacts and take properties that they don't have to. And I support that. And I've asked them to look at ways, or maybe you don't have to take properties like Mr. Watase's property. And I've heard some pretty positive things about that. I'm not ready, or I don't think they're ready to announce it, but I hear positive things. So there's that issue of adjustment. I think you're going to see it. You have a commitment from me, and I also share the concerns of this community. The other issue is one of timing. I mean, I wish we had the time to talk and plan for a long time. And I heard Councilwoman Pine saying go back to our congressional delegation. But here's the issue. There's more projects than there is money appropriated, just like always. So Congress has appropriated a lump sum of money, but the number of projects they want to do, there's not enough money for it. And so there are projects that are going forward, and money is coming off the table, and there's less money. And I've been meeting with the Army Corps to try to buy more time. And they basically come back recently, it's not, I've just learned it, that after August 31st, they're not saying the money's gone, but you're in an area where the money could be gone. You could get the money's gone. At that point, we don't need to talk anymore unless we're all willing to raise real property taxes, to raise $345 million to build some kind, or less, but raise money from other sources, our sources, instead of federal money and state money. So I'm trying to make sure that we can buy the time to continue to talk and to give assurance. And so I, about a month ago, asked the Army Corps, what else can I give you if I can't I don't have the authority. I need approval through a resolution to commit. Can I give you a roadmap? And they said, yeah, a roadmap is helpful. That roadmap got us time through the end of this month. But what they're saying is that they want to see the certificate of financial certification signed. I have it right here. Non-federal sponsors self-certification of financial capability. Why is this important? We signed this. It triggers a notification to Congress. Then in 14 days, if they don't reject it, then the Army Corps can sign this PPA. Doesn't mean they're going to sign it, but they have the authority. But it shows that there's a non-federal sponsor, that would be the city in this case, committing to say we have the financial, we have the ability, the financial capability. Doesn't mean we have the money, but we got the capability to commit the funds. And as mayor, I feel I don't have that unless I see some resolution being passed by you folks saying that, one, I can accept this 125 million or 121 million because it's limited purpose for flood mitigation, and that if the state says with that money, if you acquire lands that we need to then have transferred to us to secure the COPS, their certificates of, what is it? What's COPS stand for? Participation. That I can do that. And this Reso gives me that comfort, which is why I'm asking for that to be done. But I don't think we'll be signing a PPA anytime soon. But it'll, I think, preserve our money. And that's what I'm trying to do. We're going to be meeting with the governor tomorrow to talk about this MOU that perhaps where the state will sign and say we're going to give the city the money in writing, because I'm going to give that to the Army Corps to say the money is going to come. The governor has promised. And I believe that the money will be there. We're concerned, but as I flesh it out and talk to bond counsel, both our guys and the state's bond counsel, they make it pretty darn clear that COPS can be issued by the executive branch, but there's never going to be a default on the payment of the money, because if there was, they'd have a severe downgrade of their bonds, of which there are many more state bonds than there are city bonds. So it's going to happen. Unfortunately, we tried to do it. The governor tried, and we tried to get the funding through the legislature. The Senate was on board, the House was not. The money was taken out. So the governor is being more creative through COPS. And that COPS will not be completed probably until end of November. But I think I will work my butt off to get this non-federal sponsor self-certification signed upon getting an MOU signed. But this gives me the ability to say I can take those next steps. Now, the last thing I want to address is Councilman Waters' efforts to amend the Reso, which I appreciate. I want more public input. And I welcome that. We should continue to do it. I'm willing to commit the administration to monthly meetings before you, if you want it on the record or whatever, so public can testify as we design, as the Army Corps designs and says, here's what we're looking at, what do you think? Yes, no, maybe we got to do it anyway, because someone needs to be the expert. But my concern is with that trigger of you cannot have the money released until you get these things done. I think it's going to be a non-starter with the Army Corps. And at that point, I'm going to focus on other things. Back to homelessness, rail, and I'm going to walk away from Alawai. And maybe people will be happy. I mean, I'm not happy with a lot of the project design. But I believe as the mayor and you as council members are looking at a potential loss of $345 million. And more importantly, public safety, lives and property. Waikiki guys tell me, I don't see the operators or the owners. Are they here today?
Hey, I'm an owner.
Okay, you're an owner. We got one owner. But most of them don't really care because they have insurance or they think it's a 100-year flood. But as you see with climate change, for me, it's the 100-year flood is the 5 and 10-year flood. And Councilman Waters just remembered Wailupe. I was out there, saw that flood. This is a more common occurrence. These rain bombs will occur, and I think that we need to plan for a very changing climate, and this is part of it. So I'm here to ask you, one, to stay the course, to move a reso that does not hand tie the ability to release funds, because I don't think the Army Corps is going to take that as certainty to keep the money for us to build a project of some sort. And I'm taking the Army Corps' word, good faith, that they are changing the design of the project to address concerns of all of us. And I think all of us have those concerns. And I've seen changes made. So that's my request, that you don't let this thing go sideways. Because we're at the tail end here. I'm going off to see the governor tomorrow to try to get him to make some final decisions so that we can get in an agreement where they will write and commit in writing the 125, and I believe they will. I think his team is working, from the Attorney General to their bond counsel to everyone else, to Robert, to Neil. So I'm asking for your kukua too. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Bond?
Thank you so much, Mayor,
Thanks.
for taking the time, and thank you for telling your personal story. It helps us to understand some of your motivation. I think my concern narrows on one sentence that you just said, that by us passing this resolution today, that we are showing the federal government that we have the financial capability to do this project. And that is where I think a lot of us disagree with that statement. We do not have the financial capability to do this project. The legislature refused to fund the project. We cannot afford to pay the local match. So while I appreciate your personal story and your motivation, I know you think of those people a lot, and that's why you're pushing this project. We also unfortunately live in what we call a democracy, where we can't just ram things through a process like a private business can. We have to take in the comments of all stakeholders. And why understand your rush? It's unfortunate the timing has occurred. It sounds like this happened suddenly, and unfortunately the way that the funding was placed, it didn't include a lot of the concerns of the community in a way that was timely enough to eliminate those concerns by the time we get to this point. So is there another way, like maybe you just sign a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers that this is your top priority and that you will strive to find a local match instead of us passing a resolution that some of us may disagree with?
So you want me to find a local match? That means us providing the money, because I think you misunderstood what I said.
Okay.
COPS is coming from the state. The state is committing 125 or between 121 million and 125 million. The executive branch of the state government is committing that money.
So they're bypassing the legislative
They are issuing
process?
COPS, which is not
Okay.
a legislative-driven function. It's an executive branch-driven function. They have used COPS for a couple of projects that I'm aware of. One is the YMCA, the Hemeter building, was COPS. The Department of Hawaiian Homeland's building was COPS. And I've been told that the solar project at the airport was COPS. I don't know. Anyone know? Robert? Okay, well, I know those two. So COPS is something that the executive branch, so we're not, the financial capability I would be committing to is the guarantee that that money is coming, which means, as I mentioned, tomorrow I'm going to see the governor and ask him to sign a memorandum of understanding committing $125 million in writing to the city for the local share, because they're going to, the good news is the state is willing to pay the $125 million, so we don't have to.
I mean, the
We're
governor
lo-
is not the state. The
Well, the governor is the state.
bypassing the
Yeah, they're not
legislative
bypassing.
budget process.
It's a process they can use. Now, it has to be funded every year going forward over, I don't know, 30 years. But if the legislature decides not to fund COPS, then there is a default by the state, because we get the money. We get 121 million by the end of November under the agreement we're trying to work out. We hold that money. We don't have to expend it right away, but we have the money. They need to start paying back on that money. And if the legislature refuses to fund it, what do you call that? A default.
Craziness?
A default, you get a default. And what happens when you have a default on their certificates of participation? it has a major adverse impact on the state's bond rating, which is what I mentioned, the bonds. So with a major impact, you get a downgrade, just like we just came up with a AA plus, very good bond rating. If it gets downgraded by even down to a AA from a plus, we pay more interest. That means all the state's bonds, they're paying more interest. So the state, in my mind, is not going to default on their payments back, but we get $125 million from the state. That's why this project is $125 million from the state and $220 million from the federal government. To me, it sounds like a good deal from the financial side for all of us who represent the taxpayers of Oahu. Now, there's impacts in the valleys that I live in and others live in. Well, I don't know if any of you do. Oh, Carol does, and Ann does. But there are those impacts we need to address, and all of us are concerned. But right now, it's about preserving the option of having money to build this project. And there is that capability because it's coming from the state of Hawaii. So I just want to make that really clear to you if you didn't hear me the first time. I hope it's clear now.
I think it's very clear now,
Good.
and I
Okay.
don't think I agree with it ethically as a
Well.
former legislator, but thank
You
you
and I
for
were both
helping
former
us.
legislators.
Yes. And there's a lot of people that are from the valleys that are here.
Yes.
And, but thank you for clarifying how the state is going to fund this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate it. Mahalo.
Okay, so members, we're in discussion. Any discussion before I make my recommendation? Okay, so based on the testimonies received, together with the comments from my colleagues, I'm going to recommend the adoption of Resolution 19-182 unamended. I know that we've had the opportunity to review a proposed committee drafts from Council members, Council Chair Anderson and Council Member Waters. But I think given the lack of consensus regarding those proposed amendments, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the resolution unamended. And let me briefly explain the basis or my reasoning behind the adoption of this resolution. I'm making this recommendation given concerns that have been expressed about the possible loss of federal and state funding and the fact that there is a need for flood control improvements to reduce the potential significant damages and risk in terms of property, lives, and the economy that could result from major flooding in the Alawai watershed. It should also be noted that the design phase of the flood control project still needs to be fully implemented. And so I would urge the government entities who will be responsible for implementing this project to ensure that community concerns are adequately addressed and that the construction of flood control improvements will mitigate and not cause flood hazards or damages to surrounding communities outside of Waikiki. In this regard, I know that the council, especially the council members who represent the impacted districts, will be monitoring this project very closely going forward. And finally, a point was made in regards to the need to ensure compliance with state and county law as this project moves forward. So it's my intention to state specifically in the committee report that notwithstanding the adoption of this resolution, that all state and county, applicable state and county laws shall be complied with by the government entities responsible for the implementation of this flood control project. We'll emphasize that or specify that clearly in the committee report. So with that said, again, that's my recommendation. Any discussion, members? Yep, Councilmember Fukunaga.
Thank you. We do appreciate, the extended discussion that we have had over the last 2 days. And I think given the fact that this resolution was first introduced on August 8th, and there has been quite a bit of time, that has occurred since December, January, February, all through the last 8 months. in the community, and the discussions that have been held where many people from the community have expressed their concerns, both to the Army Corps of Engineers as well as to our Department of Design and Construction, and to many other officials. I regret that I cannot join in supporting your recommendation. I'm going to be agreeing with Councilmember Kobayashi because we believe that there is a path forward, but it will take all of the legislative branches of government to work collaboratively to try and address many of the concerns that have been raised. And we believe that adopting a resolution that has had only 2 weeks of public review is really not the way to go. Thank you.
Concerns are noted. Any other discussion? Councilmember Tsuneyoshi.
Thank you, Chair Emeritus. I'm going to have to also join Councilmember Fukunaga in her opposition of this resolution, namely because of the concerns from the council member of the district who unfortunately isn't able to be here today. But Councilmember Kobayashi's position on this very important project in her community is very important, I think, to honor her concerns for that. I think another point that was brought up today that causes me some concern is we don't have the letter in hand yet from the governor regarding the certificate of participation from the governor. So in that light, it seems a little bit premature to obligate ourselves when we don't at least have the letter in hand. I do appreciate the mayor coming to share with us his support and the efforts that the administration and the department is making to gain the certainties of the state funding, but to this time, we don't have that certainty yet. So based on the council member of the district's concerns and also the lack of letter in hand for the certificate of participation, I'll be joining Councilmember Kobayashi and Fukunaga in a no vote today.
Okay. Concerns are noted. Councilmember Pai.
First, a point of clarification. Did you say none of the amendments will be accepted?
Yes, my recommendation is to pass it out as is.
Okay, and may I provide comments in response?
Yes, please.
I do want to thank the chair for trying your best of managing this very complicated issue. However, my whole career has been about listening to the people. And I've just been very concerned about what has been happening in government, not just in Hawaii, but nationally. And I always believed in that saying that government should be for the people and by the people. And when government becomes for dictators and by dictators, that is when democracy fails. This particular issue has failed the people in so many ways, in terms of the process of how this issue has been unveiled to the public, the process of including those concerns from the public. And so many things have happened, and what I've just learned just in these 2 days, a lot of things concern me where the process has failed the people. One thing that I've always held dear that a Native Hawaiian from my district has told me, and I've always used it in all my decisions, is when you do things, you have to think of kina ole, which means the Hawaiian ideal of flawlessness. Anything less is not acceptable. In operational terms, and what we're doing here, kina ole means doing the right thing in the right way, at the right time, in the right place, to the right person, for the right reason, with the right feeling the first time. This process has failed in every sense of this meaning. This resolution fails from a legal perspective. The complexity of the discussion that we had, it was almost actually comical, where we're passing a resolution authorizing the mayor to do something that he cannot legally do until the environmental assessment, or EIS, is done. The second concern that I had, that I just heard from the mayor, that we are going to completely do away with the democratic process by bypassing the state legislature. And now the governor, I hear, is going to be like a dictator to say, forget you, democratic process. I'm taking the taxpayers' money and I'm going to sign a piece of paper that obligates the taxpayer. And all of these people here, to me, are taxpayers. All of these people here live in the areas where they may die or they may suffer. But are we doing kinaole? I say not. If this is all about money, we have lost our values. We are special in Hawaii, where a person's voice is just as loud as an entire group or just as loud as a dictator. I am very concerned about our future if this is how government is going to be. We do not live under a dictatorship. We live in a great place, a very special place in Hawaii that combines all of our voices. So with that, I respectfully disagree with you, Chair, that this does not even come close to kinaole, and so I will be voting no today. Thank you, Chair.
Concerns and orders. Of course, this is Reso is being considered in the context of the democratic process in which we received public input, and at this point in time, it's we're all accountable for our votes. So this Reso will rise or fall based on the majority vote of this committee that reflects the democratic process. But Council Chair, did you have any comments or? Oh, well, Councilmember Waters.
Just briefly, I don't like the process. I don't like the urgency, but I do believe that the warnings are true, that the funding will go elsewhere if we don't take action. So I'll be voting up. I wish you would have considered one of our amendments, but I can understand why you're not as well. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for having a hearing on this. I can understand from both sides of the issue. I'll be joining you in support of your recommendation. I think what has been enlightening in the last few days is hearing from both sides, but really hearing from the Army Corps of Engineers, the representative from the Army Corps of the Engineers, and just sharing here with the committee in terms of what they would be committed to going forward in, one, working with the community, but also understanding the issue of flood risk. And it is real. I do agree that there is sea level rise and climate change occurring. And we definitely do not want to have a serious flood incident where it could have a greater impact. And so I do appreciate the mayor for coming down and sharing his personal story, as he did represent that area at one point in time. So with that being said, we also don't want to jeopardize money that has been appropriated by Congress that is before us and leaving that on the table. So I know it is a sense of urgency. Yes, there could have been a different approach, but I think we looked at all different solutions to get us to this point, which is why we are here today. So I'll be joining you and voting in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, Council Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. As Councilmember Waters mentioned, would have rather seen one of the amended versions, but understand your perspective, Chair. I do appreciate as well the mayor sharing his personal perspective in his capacity as the former state representative for the Manoa district when the 2004 floods occurred in Manoa, particularly at the University of Hawaii, and as the mayor mentioned, the flooding of Noelani Elementary School at that particular time in 2004. I'm concerned, Chair, about the impacts that were mentioned should future flooding occur and government not moving forward with any type of actual flood mitigation, and we just continue to discuss. That's the concern that I have, Chair. I'm concerned about the potential loss of federal funding as well. That's not my entire concern, but I do have some concern about the potential loss of federal funding. I have heard from folks who are saying that they've heard from the federal government evidence to the contrary, but I haven't seen any of it. I've read emails, but I haven't seen any attachments showing that, in fact, the federal government is saying there is nothing to worry about as far as a delay in federal funding. I have heard from the Army Corps. We have heard from Senator Schatz But I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I even asked Director Cronin if he had anything to the contrary. Haven't seen it. Now, the council meeting that will take place later on today, Chair, we need to give at least 45 minutes upon the conclusion of this meeting before we can start the council meeting, because our staff is going to need time to put together the committee report. So I'm open to seeing any information to the contrary, but as of right now, I haven't seen it. So that said, Chair, I support your recommendation at this point in time.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Any other comments? No, I just wanted to say again that this has been a very tough, difficult, and complex issue, and I know that there have been diverse viewpoints on this issue, and I respect all of the viewpoints that have been expressed, both for and against the resolution, and I appreciate the willingness of the committee members to take a vote at this time and for us to make a final decision regarding this resolution, at least with respect to this committee. So if there is no further discussion, my recommendation is that said resolution be reported out for adoption. Any further discussion?
Chair, just again, please keep in mind that upon this meeting concluding, we will need 45 minutes for our staff to put together the committee reports before we can gavel to order and start of the special council meeting. Would also like to note, Chair, that we will need to take testimony for that council meeting.
Yes, and
Just a reminder to the members, we will have to take testimony for that council meeting. Thank you.
just as a reminder, we have several other items
Understand that.
on the executive matters agenda, so
Thank you.
which hope may take 45 minutes. I don't know. I mean, it might take longer, but we'll just have to wait and see. Okay. Noting the objections of council members Fukunaga, Pine, and Suniyoshi, are there any other objections, reservations? Okay. Hearing none, it's so ordered. All right.